Toms, one of my least favorite drums to mix, not because they sound bad, but because there's so much bleed in all the microphones all the time. If it's not mic'd properly, sometimes it's really tough to get a good tone out of these drums. Today I'm going to show you how I get a lovely, lovely tom tone. The track we're going to be mixing today is Kaz Rodriguez's Rivet. Let's hop in. Let's take a listen to the toms that we're going to be mixing today. Alright, so on these rack toms, I used the Audix Micro D, and there was 2 rack toms, and then there's 1 floor tom that I used the D6. So let's hop into rack 1 and see how this guy's sounding. Lots of bleed. If you watch the other snare and kick videos, I've been using this silencer plugin recently and loving the results that it's putting out. Let's see what it can do with these toms. Very cool. Takes out a lot of that bleed. There's a little bit of snare still poking through at some points, especially when he's hitting really hard. But I'm totally okay with that, especially in a full setting of like a full room. You're going to get snare poking through all the mics, and honestly, it's just something that you kind of mix for. So next, I like to go into some EQ, and it's a bit of an interesting EQ on this one. So I'm boosting a lot of top end because I like a lot of crack in my toms. A little 8K, some 5K, and then I cut some 1K and some 370 here on this tom. And then on the low end, on the fundamental, what I like doing is creating a dynamic band with this FabFilter Pro Q. And the reason for that is if you were to just make a regular band on this, sometimes that low frequency of the toms kind of builds up over time, and especially when you're going crazy on all the different toms, builds up a lot. So I like to make it a dynamic one, so when it's hit, it goes up, and then it goes right back down and it doesn't ring in the whole mix. I'll show you what it sounds like with just the straight EQ band on it first. Okay, and then if we make it dynamic, not crazy noticeable on a higher tom like this, but once it gets into some of those lower frequency toms, they build up pretty quick, and especially when there's a guy going crazy on them, you don't want it to get too muddy in your mix and just drown everything else out. Next for this tom, I'm going into this virtual mix rack. I've got this 1073 pre. I was just flipping the phase. It sounded better on this phase setting, so we're keeping it there. Next, we got this API EQ here, the FGA. I'm just boosting some 20 kilohertz, 4 decibels. And then I'm going into the FG401 VCA compressor. So on toms, I don't like to compress them super hard unless we're dealing with like some really heavy metal music or something. I'll maybe compress it a little bit more, but here I'm running a 3-to-1 ratio, only compressing around like 3 to 5 decibels on this guy. So let's hear what this is doing. Puts it right in that pocket. And then if you watched the previous videos, I've been messing around with this Eddie Kramer drum plugin here, and I've got it on the tom setting. Let's hear what this is doing. It's adding, I think, a little bit of just compression, a little bit EQ, and just some overall feel to the drum. Let's hear what it's doing. Very cool. Just another stage of compression, making them really nice and in your face. All right, let's move on to rack 2. Let's hear what this is sounding like. Cool. Again, we're putting silencer on here first. Let's hear how well this works on this tom. Miracle. All right, then we're going back into some EQ here. I'm doing my dynamic band again here. Not so much of a boost here, but about the same on the frequencies here. I'm boosting 10K, boosting some 5.8, cutting 1000, cutting some 370, and then just boosting the fundamental, just up to taste. Hear what this sounds like. Very nice. Makes it just cut right through the mix. Again, we're going into the same exact compression stack that I have here, just a little bit different on the threshold setting just because of gain differences on the microphone, but I'm shooting for about the same 3 to 5 decibels of compression. See what that's doing. No, not as much as the other one, but still sounds great. And then we're going to the Eddie Kramer drum plugin again. See what this is doing. A lot more compression on this tom. I leaned heavier on the Eddie Kramer plugin. Looks like on the rack one, I leaned heavier into the FG401 here. All right, now on to the floor tom. Let's hear what this is sounding like. Cool. Right into silencer. Let's see how well this works on the floor tom. Pretty well. All right, then again, I'm going into some EQ. Looks like on this floor tom, I was just overall boosting some low end just because I want a lot from that mic. Cutting more mid-range and boosting some more top end. You hear the same frequencies as the other toms, but I'm boosting some 10K, some 5.8, cutting some 966 and 345, and then boosting 62 right on the fundamental. Let's see what that sounds like. Very cool. Then I'm going into another EQ on this where I am boosting the dynamic band. Cutting a little more mid-range because I just don't want it to be so floppy sounding. You'll hear once we boost some of this low end, cut a little more mid-range, the tom really comes to life. See what that sounds like. With toms, a lot of the times, at least in my room over here at the mix house, I'm cutting a lot of mid-range on these because I know that I'm getting a lot of that mid-range from the overheads. So from the direct mics themselves, really what I want is that low end and that top end smack, and the rest will be kind of filled in by the overheads. And that's just how I've found to get a good balance in my drum room. Next, again, we're going into this Eddie Kramer drum plugin. Let's see what this is doing. Very cool. And then I have an overall tom bus that I'm sending all 3 of these toms to. That all I'm doing is boosting a little more low end because I think when I was listening to it, it just wasn't cutting through with that low end as much as, say, like the kick drum was. So I just wanted to kind of boost all that, especially in this drum solo. So I'm going to show you what these toms sound like with no processing on them in the full mix, and then we'll put everything back on and hear what we achieved. And there you go. That's how you get a clean, nice, beautiful tom mix. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. If you're curious about the snare or kick tones, I've got other videos on those. And coming up next, we're going to be working on the overheads and room tones. Cheers, guys. Peace.